I called the introduction to emotionally healthy discipleship the difficult journey to move beyond shallow discipleship. I called it that because it is a difficult journey. It really is. Emotionally healthy discipleship and what you will read about on the pages that follows is very liberating, it's life-giving, it's powerful, and much more. But make no mistake about it, it's difficult, very difficult. And why? Because we're talking about moving the culture of the church from what I call a traditional discipleship model to a transformative one in which people experience deep change. So in this introduction, I tell my story of my own difficult journey, and it was. I was in my late 30s when I began, so I had a lot to unlearn. I had been formed as a disciple and as a pastor leader to follow Jesus a certain way. And it was good in many ways, and I try to bring that out in the chapter, but it was limited. Some of you may not have as much to unlearn, but it will still be a difficult journey because the material has to pass through your own life with Jesus first, and then you'll be in a place to bring it to your ministry or church culture. So in this opening, I share a very important illustration from stone masonry. And I contrast the slow, costly process done by master masons with real stone to what's called stone cladding. It's an image worth thinking about, researching, and actually mastering. You see, my son-in-law is a real stone mason. And when they build a structure, it will last generations because they use real heavy stone and they're highly trained. Just think of the pyramids of Egypt or medieval castles or well-made stone farmhouses in our day. But because it is such a costly and time-consuming process, the construction industry has developed cheaper, faster alternatives over the years. And these give the appearance of real stone, but they're only using a veneer called cladding. Now, cladding comes in two categories. The first is what I have in front of my house. They just cut very thin 1 to 5 inch slabs, and they place it over the exterior wall. It looks great, looks like real stone, but it's not holding anything up. And the guys working on my house had no experience in masonry, but they did it in a day. And the second kind of cladding isn't even thin stone, but it's just cement painted over to look like real stone. It's so fast and easy to learn, you can learn it on YouTube and do it in half a day. But the contrast of real masonry and cladding is such an important illustration because much of discipleship in today's church is the spiritual equivalent of cladding. On the surface, everything looks like the real thing. People attend the church, they hear the word, they're meeting in small groups, they're serving in ministries, and they're giving their time, treasure, and talents. The problem is that it's not the heavy, load-bearing stone of Jesus' way of discipleship. It appears to be the real thing that will endure severe storms and last generations, but it's not going to stand the test of time. People's transformation in Christ remains at the level of cladding, a thin veneer on a life that is yet to be touched deep beneath the surface. Cladding discipleship surely describes the first 17 years of my life as a Jesus follower and my leadership. I looked great on the surface, but I had large gaps in my discipleship and my leadership. Now, emotionally healthy discipleship is an invitation to radically shift toward the real thing, a discipleship that is heavy, load-bearing stone. And at its core, emotionally healthy discipleship, or we call it EHD, is a biblical theology that, when fully implemented, it informs every area of a church, ministry, or organization. It deals with things like slowing down our lives to cultivate a deep, personal relationship with Jesus so that our doing flows from a deep sense of being with Him. It's about following the crucified, not the Americanized Jesus. It's about embracing the gift of God's limits in our lives. It integrates sadness and loss into our following of Jesus. It enables us not to miss the treasures God has buried within them. It makes love the true measure of spiritual maturity, breaks the power of the past, and teaches us to lead out of weakness and thus access the power of God. Now, each of the chapters could have been its own book. There is that much in them. So I'm going to ask, not that you so much read the book, but that you let the book read you. In other words, you read it prayerfully, taking notes in the margin, stopping to pause and pray when God speaks to you. maybe journaling about some key moments. But let God come to you. And my prayer is that God will meet you in a fresh way, for your sake, for those around you, and of course, for those you lead.